Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to my YouTube channel. My name is Drew, and I have been playing poker to make a living since 2010. I'm primarily a tournament player online, and when I first got into playing poker, I knew there was a way to beat the game and to do better at the game, but I wasn't sure how. So at first, what I did, I had developed a player types video, how I would play certain players, and that's also on my channel. If you scroll down the videos, you'll see it's one of the first videos I made. It's about player types. But in today's video, what I'm going to talk to you about is something I learned a few years later down the line, which is how to use a HUD, a heads-up display, while playing online. And basically, there are some statistics that you can gather while playing with players that you can use to make adjustments and to learn more about how they're playing the game. So what I'm going to do is I have 4 different player types up here that I'm going to show you, and I have the HUD stats for each of them, and I'm going to analyze them and tell you what type of information I gather from them and how I might exploit their playing style in order to make more chips, go deeper in tournaments, and win more money. So check it out. All right, so I have 4 tables here, and in the top left here, we'll take a look at this player first in the hero seat. So the hands are irrelevant, but we're going to look at the HUD stats. All right, so this is my custom heads-up display that I've catered to the way that I look at the game. Now, there are quite a few stats here. I'm going to start at the top, and then I'm just going to basically ramble and go through all this. All right, so this VPIP, PFR, and 3-bet. I'm not going to get into too much detail about these stats as far as explaining what they are. That's kind of the basics. What I really want to focus on is how to make adjustments and how to read this information and make something of it, okay? So VPIP, voluntarily put in pot, PFR is pre-flop raise, and then 3-bet PF is 3-bet pre-flop. Okay, now at first glance, the 2013-4, what I see here is, as far as the VPIP, this isn't bad playing 20% of hands. You could definitely play more, 22, 25. This is a decent hand sample here, 1,600 hands. So it's not a small sample. We can definitely gain some information here and some strong information. PFR here, this is how often they're raising pre-flop, and 13 is not bad. It's definitely on the tighter side. Typically, if you're looking at some strong winning tournament regulars, you're gonna see some stats like 22, 18, 10, for example. You know, some a little bit more aggressive opponents, you're gonna see 25, 22, 11, 12% with the 3-bet. So this player is a little bit on the tighter side. This 4% 3-bet pre-flop, this is very tight. And basically 3%, if somebody was 3-betting 3% pre-flop, that's jacks, queens, kings, and aces, and ace-king, suited and ace-king unsuited. That's what 3% is. So when I look at these stats here and I see that somebody is only 3-betting 4% pre-flop, basically that means that when they re-raise you pre-flop, get out of the way for the most part. It's going to be a very, very tough range to play against. They're going to have very, very big hands a lot of the time. Okay, now this HUD that I use here, it's a positional one on PokerTracker 4. And basically it goes by position. So if you go down, this is small blind, BB is big blind, early position, middle position, cutoff, and button. All right, so that's the first place that I look to gather information, and I will typically put color codes on players depending on what type of style I think that this is indicating. So like I said, check out my player types video where it does talk a little bit more about different player types. I'll drop the link in the description for you. And then now this raise first. What this means is basically that when it folds to a player, how often will they be the first person to raise? All right, so you want to see this, I like to see this about 25, 30. Raise first here, 21 is not bad. Again, they could be raising a bit more. And let's see here. So let's go by position. We'll start at early position. Okay, now 19%, this is not bad. It's a little aggressive. A lot of range charts that you will look at want you raising around 15%. So this is a little bit more aggressive in early position, which could be why here, when we look down at this, then fold to 3-bet. So folds to them, they raise, and then how often are they going to fold to 3-bet? You see as a whole, they're folding 64% of the time. This is too high. When I look at this stat, basically I am seeing that, okay, when this person raises, if they encounter any aggression, they are going to give up their hand a lot of the time. 64% is just too high. You want to make the opponent who's looking at your HUD stats a little bit indifferent to 3-bet you. So if this is around 45, 50%, maybe even 55%, it's like, it's kind of a coin flip. I don't know if this person's going to fold or not. Whereas here we can be sure it's like, okay, the majority of the time this person is going to be folding when we re-raise them. All right, and that could be why we see here in early position this 19%. They're raising a little bit more than might typically be suggested, and you can see they are folding 63% of the time here in early position. So this is an okay sample again, not too bad, but it's pretty telling. If you look at this and I think somebody's raising too much in early position, I see they have a high fold to 3-bet, and I'm looking to pick up some chips. So I have like a raggedy ace that maybe doesn't play well post flop. I might 3-bet this person and assume I'm going to get a bunch of folds. All right, now here in middle position, they are raising okay. Really, we want this to be something like 15, 25, 35, and then like 50 plus here on the button. So as we go through the position here, you could see probably could raise a little bit more here, still folding a bunch when we raised here, and then the cutoff. Now this is something that I've noticed in studying stats, that if you look at the cutoff, this should definitely be closer to 35, 40%, so not raising enough here. We already identified that this player is likely not raising enough pre-flop. But then the button here, this should almost be 20% higher. And what I find when I see stats like this is a lot of people know that you're supposed to be raising in late position. So that for newer players, there starts to become this hesitation to raise in late position because everybody knows that you're going to be raising in late position, and they might 3-bet you a little bit wider. And there's some anxiety that kind of comes around that spot, and people don't want to be in that situation. So what they'll start to do is overfold, like, oh, I should open this, but it's a little too obvious, I'm gonna fold, right? So you don't want to fall to that, because the fact of the matter is, when you're in late position, you have something incredible working in your favor: position. Position is power. So you cannot let fear of raising in a later position deter you from doing something where you have an incredible advantage over your opponents. But this is something very common that I will see in players who tend to seem like they are tighter. They let the fear of certain situations drive their play, and you can't do that. And again, this is a small sample, I'm very aware, but let's just assume that these are decent samples. You can see this 2 of 2. When they raise in the cutoff, they get 3-bet, fold. When they raise on the button, they get 3-bet, fold. 100% in these 3-hand sample. But again, assume I'm trying to help you to understand when you look and see stuff, what you should be looking for, and how you can interpret that and adjust. Alrighty, so I definitely see this person is basically, translation is, they seem to be afraid of confrontation. All right, so now going down here, they're not doing a lot of calling to the 3-bets because they're mostly folding, which this could also be another indicator that this player is not incredibly comfortable post-flop, and they're just going to, I'll just wait for a better situation, I'll just wait for a better time, not flatting too much, folding the majority of the time, not raising enough in late position. These are all starting to be signs that this player is non-confrontational. Alrighty, seeing the 4-bet plus here, especially in tournaments, when they're 4-bet jamming, a lot of the time the stat I feel like can be a little bit skewed because you raise something, you're going all in, and that's a 4-bet jam, right? It's not like a non-all-in 4-bet where you're 100 big blinds deep, somebody re-raises you, and then they re-raise you and they still have 50 blinds behind. That's not going to happen a real lot in tournaments unless it's early, and usually when you see it in the majority of tournaments, especially like mid to low stakes online, it's going to be a really big hand, so you could just fold your hand a lot of the time. All right, so now down here at the call any pre-flop raise here, this is indicating how often somebody is just calling a raise. 13% is pretty, it's lower, it's tighter. You usually don't want to see this too much above 20%. Once I start to see this around 30% for their overall, they're probably calling too much and just trying to see hands, trying to see if they hit. This is a a place that we all go through as we're learning and getting better in poker. If you think about when you learn poker, the first thing you learn is hand rankings, right? And, oh, this connects with this. I'm looking to make a flush. I'm looking to make a straight. I'm looking to make two pair. Let me call and see what happens. A lot of players will go through that stage and they don't adjust. And a lot of the time when you don't have the lead, the power of aggression is going to get the best of you. But this player here is, again, not really calling too much, so they might be avoiding a lot of confrontation here. Now let's go where we really should be doing a lot of calling pre-flop, in the big blind. Right here, and you could see that they're only calling 34%. So that is not much. You really should be calling around 50% or so in the big blind, in my experience. So when I see 34% here, and if it folds to me in late position, for instance, and I see somebody is not calling their big blind a lot, then that is the green light for me. It's like, okay, this person is going to give up their big blind a lot. They are probably not going to be 3-betting it a bunch. And now you could see big blind, the 3-bet, 1% 3-bet from the big blind. When you see this, you do not have to be worried about raising in late position versus this player. They are not going to 3-bet you light. They 3-bet you from the big blind, pick up the phone, call an ambulance, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Get out of there. All right, legit. Now, these are some reads we got going on here. And then also you could take a look here. If they're doing a lot of calling on the button or cutoff, you can get an idea. There will be some players you'll see do a lot of calling on the button, maybe too much. But what we're doing is going through and analyzing where and how often people are doing things. So limping here, this is a very common thing in online poker you'll see, especially if a player is newer. This limp 3%. This is not bad. This is fine. A lot of players you're going to see, including good players, are going to fall in between right around 3%, honestly, 3 to 5%. So this is not a bad thing. We don't want to be doing too much limping the majority of the time in these other positions here, but we do want to do a good amount of limping from the small blind. So this seems totally fine here. So we're going to move on. The limp fold here, you can see a lot of the time when they're limping, it is, though, happening to be some weaker hands. 71% of the time they limp, they'll fold in a 7-hand sample. They are mostly folding from the small blind. And then here we see they limped a couple of other times here and had to fold some instances. Fold to late position, a bunch here, 70%. So again, just kind of avoiding a bit of confrontation. But let's continue here. How often do they fold to the flop c-bet? So here, 58%, not too bad. If we were to see that they folded to flop c-bet like 80% of the time, and be like, okay, I'm going to c-bet all the time versus this player because 80% of the time I'm just going to win. But if you had a big hand and you didn't want them to fold, and you saw the 80% fold to c-bet, maybe try a different line versus that player. Okay, and then here I really like this call F c-bet. This is call flop c-bet in position and out of position. Now we should be calling c-bets in position more because then we get to act last and see how they respond on the turn. But then out of position, we shouldn't be calling too much. So nothing really too telling here. Let's see here. Now this is something that's very telling. This c-bet flop here at 88%. At 88%, this means this is too high. We only connect with boards about a third of the time. So when you see somebody continuation betting, almost 90%, they are over c-betting. They are, what is happening here, and I've been here so I can connect with this situation, they are continuation betting and just hoping that nobody calls, they don't have to deal with the hand anymore. They are hoping you just fold. And players like that, it's fine. It's kind of a newer stage. I know I can remember when I've been there and I just bet, please fold. But this is too high. You typically want to be a little bit more around like 60-ish% here with your c-betting. Okay, so this person is c-betting too much, and when they raise and when they get raised, they're folding 60% of the time. So they just cannot connect with the board all this often, and we're seeing 60% of the time they fold when raised. So this seems like somebody who I would like to check raise on some flops, or just raise them maybe when we are in position and they continue. They're going to give up a lot. And again, we've already established this player seems to be a bit non-confrontational, so we can take advantage of these things. All right, so let me see here. The continuation bet turn, kind of normalish. I think that's fine. Bet turn, nothing too telling there. The check raise from the XR is check raise total, and 7%. Really, this should be a bit higher, and a lot of that is going to be coming from the big blind. We want to be somewhere around in between 10 to 15% check raise in the big blind. I think 15% is really nice. It makes you really hard to play against. But here, this isn't too bad. This is not a player that I'm going to continuation bet and be worried that they're going to check raise me a lot. But there are some players you would have to worry about that from. Alrighty. Now, this probe total stat here, 56%. This is aggressive. Thinking about the population of people that I play against in the mid to low stakes, and some a little bit of higher stakes, 109s, 215s primarily is like where I'm at. But this probe total means how often when you do not c-bet, how often this person will bet the next street out of position versus you. So this is very cool to see against some aggressive players. Let's say this was the person who c-bets or folds to c-bet a lot. You have a big hand, you don't want them to fold to c-bet, you could check back flop, and it's like, 56% of the time, this person is going to bet into me on the turn. And you can see from the big blind here, this player, indeed, 62% of the time, if you do not continuation bet, they will bet out on the turn. So you can utilize that in some situation, depending on how big your hand is. Alrighty, and not too much else to gather. The bet river is aggressive in this sample. You'll see, if you were to see 30% here on the bet river, they're betting way too honest and they're not bluffing enough on the river. You could just make a lot of folds to them. Or if you were to see call river at like 80%, this is somebody who typically you'll find is just like a bit of a non-believer. They think you're bluffing a lot. They're going to check call you with second and third pairs, weak top pairs for potentially any bet size that you use. So let's see here. Let's take a look now at another player. So this player that I pulled out here, this is a very tight player that I found. And we have 1,200 hands on this player, a little over 1,200 hands. And based on what I just said, we're going to run through these as well. You can see this player is playing 17, 11, 6. They are not calling enough. They're not raising enough. They are 3-betting a little bit more than the other player at 6%. So they're going to be 3-betting 10s, jacks, queens, kings, aces, ace, king, some ace, queen, maybe some ace, jack suited, but not much more than that. And they're definitely not raising enough pre-flop. So let's go ahead and take a look at these stats here. Let's see, the raise first is even lower than the other one, but we already knew that based on these stats here. So I would tag this player as tight. And then let's see here. So they're playing a bit more where they should in early position, but yet they are still folding a bunch here in early position. You can see 75%, the majority of the time they get 3-bet here, they fold. And then it goes 13, 20, 28, a little bit tight, and then 31. So again, this is another tight player here who is not raising enough in late position. And again, what I said the first time, a lot of the time this means that this is a non-confrontational player who is concerned about receiving playback. So let's see here, fold to 3-bet. Not too bad. It seems like they're continuing a little bit more than the other opponent that we saw. It makes me indifferent to 3-betting them. And it could be because of the fact that they only play very strong hands here. They only play very strong hands. So when you 3-bet this player, I think it makes sense that they're not folding as much because they just have strong hands that can continue. All right, so let's see here. The call any pre-flop raise, we talked about this, 20% in the big blind. And they are 3-betting a little bit, but 7% is not really much. But you can see they are not defending their big blind enough at all. I would not be concerned about raising this player's big blind. They are the majority of the time just going to fold and let you have the chips. And this can be something that is huge. Think about being late in a tournament, deep, and you have 2 players to your left who are not defending their big blinds or their small blinds here. You see right here, not playing out of the small blind, not playing really out of the big blind. This is very tight in the small blind here. So you could just raise and take these people's blinds, and it could be what propels you to a final table and keeps your stack alive when there are 2 aggressive players to your right or other good players. So being able to notice this is massive. Let's see here. They don't do a bunch of limping. Nothing too much to get there. Small sample, but we talked about that. Fold to flop c-bet. Now this player here at 30% does not believe you when you c-bet. Alrighty, they do not believe you when you c-bet. So when they do defend their big blind, it looks like they are not folding to a c-bet much. So this is a player where I'm not going to try to get tricky. If I have a big hand, I'm just going to continue to bet, and that's going to be it. So this could be a little bit of a non-believer syndrome, because what I've found in the past through coaching sessions is there are some tight players out there who will play so tight, and they kind of have this monsters under the bed, like people are attacking me. People are playing really aggressive because they know I'm tight. And while that could be true, this could be a product of that, is now they're not folding to continuation bets because they know that they're playing too tight and they don't want to be overly exploitable. So that could be what's going on here. Just some food for thought. Let's see here. Fold to turn bet, not folding to turn bet much. But again, they're defending their big blind really tight, so they might just happen to have strong hands here when they do actually decide to play pots. That could be what's going on here. Now, their c-bet stat here is much more reasonable at 69%. Giggity. They're not over c-betting like the 88% person we just saw last. And then you could see here, though they are still fairly aggressively c-betting. It's not too bad. They're betting their draws. They're betting their top pairs. They might even be betting some middling pairs that are pretty strong. They're not folding 60% like we saw the last opponent. So when they do get raised, this again could be a little bit of I don't believe you syndrome, or it could be a product of they're just taking stronger hands to the flop. So let's see. Check raise. In this sample, they're check raising decent out of the big blind. Again, this could be a product of them just only playing strong hands. When they go, we see a little bit of a difference here. This person is not betting out on the turn when you do not c-bet. And their river betting is much more honest than the other person at like 31%. They might not even be betting weak top pairs when they get to the river. They might even be checking strong top pairs when a flush comes in on the river. They're not likely ever going to be trying to value bet a second pair that with a strong kicker on the river. Might not even be trying to bet like two pair or sets on the river if a flush comes in, for instance. So that is some food for thought there. Now, let's go check out this player type down here. Now, this is a different player type. We have 850 hands on this player, but this is a bit more passive of an opponent, okay? Now, we look at this and we see 33-7-7. Now, there is a big gap here between their VPIP and their PFR. So what this means is this player is either doing heaps of limping or heaps of calling. They're playing a lot of pots where they do not come in as the raiser. So 7% is very tight. 3-betting 7% is very tight, even though it's slightly wider than the first two players that we saw. 7% again is like maybe 9s, 10s plus. Ace-Jack suited, maybe Ace-Jack off, Ace-Queen, Ace-King. All right, but they're doing way too much calling. This is a player who is likely in the earlier stages of their poker. They're very recreational, and they right now in this stage are connecting mostly with trying to make hands. That is going to be the driving factor in their mind. Let me call and see what happens. I don't want to risk too many chips. These are the things that could be leading this player to play this type of style. And again, reminder, check out my player types video. I'll drop the link again in the video like I said earlier, and you will get more of an idea of these player types that I'm describing. All right, so let's take a look here. So this raise first. 8%, the lowest we've seen yet. Again, they're only raising their super strong hands. We could see here, look at early position. They are only raising, jacks are better here, ace king. Not raising, not raising, not raising. This is incredibly too tight. This is a passive opponent, and the easiest counter strategy to this type of opponent is aggression. It is very, very obvious. When they do not connect, they will fold. They will let you have the lead. You will be able to put them in tons of difficult situations by betting. Now, the other side of that is sometimes these players don't fold, and they might get the best of you. So you need to figure out, depending on board textures, what type of hands they might have. This is also the opponent where when they hit, if there are draws on the flop, a lot of the time they are going to raise you. When this player starts to show aggression, you need to be very cautious with how you proceed, because when they hit, they will protect their hand. They will fight back, but that is it. So this is something very telling about this player. So let us see here. Then fold to 3-bet. After they raise, this is a very small sample because they're not raising enough. But guess what? When they raise, they're not folding. You know why? Because they're only raising like aces. All right, so let's see here. Now we go down to the call any pre-flop raise. We already discussed this up top in another example. 30% calling too much. Look at the limp. 29% out of 503 hands. This player has limped 146 of them. That is wild. It makes sense. Again, this is a newer player to the game, trying to see flops, all the things I've already said, but look at the massive, massive difference here. All right. And when they limp, they don't fold a lot of the time. They'll call your raise. Okay. They're going to call 67% of the time because they kept the pot small. They want to see a flop. They're determined to see a flop. So when you raise, they're going to call. Adjust your strategy accordingly and just know that. So here we go. Now, a lot of things that can happen with this player too. They could be a little bit of a non-believer where they're just not going to believe your c-bets. And as we go down to fold to flop c-bet, they only fold to a flop c-bet 24% of the time. You need to barrel this person or they're just going to continue with a lot of things. That's if you're bluffing. But at this point, if you have a value hand, a very strong hand, do not trap this person. Do not check. Do not do anything but bet. They will give you money, 1,000,000% here. They're not folding to any turn continuation bets. They're even doing a lot of calling out of position, which is not a good idea because you can just continue to get punished. So let me see here. Continuation betting the flop, 30%, super low. They will bet when they hit. I just talked about that. When they start to show aggression, be weary. This person is only betting when they hit. We hit flops about 1/3 of the time. Even when they only raise super strong hands, they are only betting when they hit. They're likely check calling otherwise or just giving up. So let's see anything else. Of course, we could have assumed they are not check raising much. 3% is nothing. Don't worry about them check raising you again. When they show aggression, it's because they finally hit. And that is that. The bet river we talked about. 24%, very low. They only bet when they have it. And then this call river bet, do not be surprised. They're calling the river bets 66% of the time. This is way, way, way too much. You do not want to be calling river bets this much. And honestly, thinking about the mid to low stakes and even some high stakes players, they are not properly value betting rivers. So considering people are not properly value betting rivers and the majority of time players are tight on the river, calling at 66% of the time is going to be a huge, massive leak. All right, so let's check this out now. One more opponent's stats to analyze here. A bit more aggressive of an opponent. All right, this opponent is playing a bit more of a regular type of strong, tight aggressive style. Not even really tight, just an aggressive style. A little bit more of a loose aggressive style, really. They're playing 25, 19, and 8. So we don't see a huge gap here in between the VPIP and PFR, which means a lot of the time when they enter the pot, they are coming in raising. They're going to have the lead. They're going to be applying pressure. So I would tag this opponent usually as a regular or an aggressive player, one of the two. Though they could be 3-betting a little bit more, 8% is much, much better than the other ones that we've seen here in the samples of 1,400 hands. So let's see, raise first, up around 30%, where I said I kind of like to see it earlier in the video. And then let's go by position here. We see 23% in early position. This is a bit wide and they can get exploited for this because you're going to be raising. If you're raising 23%, you're going to start to be raising too many hands that cannot continue when you get 3-bet. Though, looking at this, these stats here, this player also seems to be a little bit like a non-believer. So this could be one of those aggressive players who does not like to give up, maybe even a little bit stubborn, or they think because they're playing so aggressive that, wow, people are going to start to fight back. I can't lie down. These are some thoughts that I've found in some students, and also I've definitely traveled through this stage of poker here, so I know what this is like. They're calling too much. 60% of the time they call a 3-bet. This is way too much. You just cannot be raising a bunch and calling and going to the flop 60% of the time when somebody shows you aggression. Because also just think about how often people are not correctly or even 3-betting us enough. So for the population, not 3-betting us enough, this is a bit non-believery in that, look, you're giving people credit for exploiting you and 3-betting you aggressively. that doesn't make sense. People just aren't. So they should be folding more to 3-bets here. They're calling way too much, and they got a little bit of a non-believer in them, even though they do play an aggressive strategy. Again, this could be a very, very big leak. So let's see here. 23, too much in early position. Middle position, fine. A bit better in cutoff, could raise more, but then it tapers off on the button. This really should be a little bit more like 50%. So this player could be a little bit too conscious of people potentially fighting back at them when they're raising late position, or they just don't know the hands that they should be raising in late position. They might not have access to raising charts and things like that to know. So let's go down here. They're not doing too much calling pre-flop. This makes sense. They want to have the lead. They are defending their big blind, the most of the sample we've seen here, 37%. I still think we could probably defend a little bit more, but this is much, much better than the other examples. Here you could see the limping stat, 1%. Again, this person tends to want to have the betting lead, be in control. I think that makes sense. That's like an aggressive mindset. Though one thing that does seem to be quite imbalanced here is we should definitely be limping in the small blind more nowadays, especially in tournaments with the different stack depths that we're going to have. This person probably overly relies on being aggressive and fighting in some situations. So of these HUD stats we've seen so far, we kind of want to blend some of all of what they're doing into like that player that is tough to play against because you don't know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to be mixing their strategy really well. You can't predict and know where the kinks in their armor are, and you can just have to play a bit more balanced of a strategy in order to be effective versus them. Whereas each of these players, we've been able to find some spots where it's like, I will attack here, I will attack here, I will attack here. They play too much here. Do you see what I mean? Let me see. So let's go down here. They do not fold to flop c-bets all the time, so a little bit indifferent. Let's see. C-bet flop, 70%. Not bad, a little bit high, but against a lot of people, especially if there's some of these other players who potentially fold too much to c-bets, then even though we didn't really see that example here, let's see, then that could be too much, but I don't think it's bad, especially if you play really well post-flop. Let's see here. Check raise, 11%. 14 from the big blind. Not bad. Definitely not too tight. Again, this is a bit more of an aggressive opponent. The probe total, not bad. Especially a lot of this is going to come out of the big blind. If you miss a c-bet, you give an aggressive opponent a chance to be aggressive. A good amount of the time, they're going to be aggressive. So you need to keep that in mind. And then on the river here, they are not calling river bets. When they get to the river, if they do not have the lead, they will a lot of the time be giving up. So this is a player who prefers to be in the driver's seat. So you might be able to exploit that. Once they start showing some passivity, then we can attack. They do like to bet the river, but when they are not in the position to be betting the river, you can see they're just folding to a lot of river bets. So you might be able to exploit that and bluff this person a little bit more on the river because they are not being a non-believer on the river. They are giving up a lot. So that could be a way to exploit that as well. That is kind of a rundown on some HUD stats and how you might be able to make some adjustments, make some assumptions about players based on that information. I will say that a lot of people will ask, like, what's the minimum amount of hands you want to have on somebody to start making some educated decisions or assumptions? And my starting point's kind of like around 200 hands, but I will say that we can start to make some assumptions at 50 hands. For instance, you come up upon a player who you only have 50 hands on, but they are limping 50% of those 50 hands. That is telling, okay? You come up on an opponent who in a 50-hand sample has folded to every single 3-bet. How many times are you going to come across an opponent in a 50-hand sample and they're going to fold to every single 3-bet? Do you get what I mean? There are going to be some things that if you look at the stats closely, you'd be like, okay, what are the odds that this is just not a passive player when they just limp the majority of the time? Like you're not going to see an aggressive opponent limp a large portion of the time. It's going to be much less. So to see a noticeable limp stat in a 50-hand sample, I'm going to jump to some conclusions, even though it's not 200 hands. Okay, so with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the comment section down there. And if you liked my HUD profile, I will drop a link, or I will describe to you how to get it from me in the description below. So please, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like the video, drop a comment, and I'll see you next time. Until then, good luck on the tables. Drew out. Peace. Thanks for making it to the end of my video. No one does that, do they? All right, look, I respond to comments, so please leave a comment below the description and let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, check out some of my last videos here, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button here. All right, my name is Drew. Peace out. Catch up with you later.